This is TradeFlow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. TradeFlow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets. Saudi Arabia, the world's largest oil exporter, more than doubled the amount of Russian fuel oil it imported in the second quarter to feed power stations to meet summer cooling demand and free up the kingdom's own crude for export, data showed and traders said. Russia has been selling fuel at discounted prices after international sanctions over its invasion of Ukraine left it with fewer buyers. Moscow calls the war in Ukraine a special military operation. The increased sales of fuel oil, used in power generation, to Saudi Arabia show the challenge that US President Joe Biden faces as his administration seeks to isolate Russia and cut its energy export revenues.
Oil prices fell more than $4 on Thursday as investors focused on the prospect of a large U.S. rate hike later this month that could stem inflation but at the same time hit oil demand. Brent crude futures for September fell by $4.05 to $95.52 a barrel by 13:56 GMT and were on track to finish a third session in a row below $100. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude for August delivery was at $91.63 a barrel, down $4.67. Both contracts hit lows on Thursday which were below the February 23 close, the day before Russia invaded Ukraine, with Brent reaching its lowest since February 21.
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
Indonesia and India on Thursday underscored a call by emerging nations for more climate change financing, warning that rising energy prices due to the Ukraine war would make it difficult for countries to cut emissions. With inflation rising globally amid the Russia-Ukraine conflict, some countries, including in Europe, have reverted to coal and other fossil fuel-based power or delayed their energy transition out of concerns over affordability and supplies. India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman and her Indonesian counterpart, Sri Mulyani Indrawati, said at a G20 event in Bali that emerging markets' energy transition should not come at high costs to the public.
The European Commission has proposed to EU countries a deal with Azerbaijan to increase imports of natural gas and support the expansion of a pipeline to do this, according to a draft document seen by Reuters. The draft Memorandum of Understanding, which needs approval from the governments involved and could still change, is part of European Union efforts to slash reliance on Russian gas following the war in Ukraine. The sides aspire to support bilateral trade of natural gas, including through exports to the European Union, via the Southern Gas Corridor, of at least 20 billion cubic meters of gas annually by 2027, in accordance with commercial viability and market demand, said the document, dated July 11.
Next, we have the top news in metal markets.
Deteriorating demand and robust supplies have triggered an aluminium price crash, and while further losses are possible, they are unlikely to be sustained as squeezed margins prompt smelters to slow ramp-ups or cut output. Soaring inflation, interest rate hikes and COVID restrictions in top producer and consumer China have weakened demand for the metal used in the transport, packaging and construction industries. Misplaced expectations of disrupted supplies from Russia after it invaded Ukraine are another reason why aluminium on the London Metal Exchange, LME, has dropped 40% to $2,350 a ton since hitting a record high in March.
Efforts to reach carbon neutrality by 2050 are likely to remain out of reach as copper supply fails to match demand amid growing use of solar panels, electric vehicles and other renewable technologies, data from S&P Global showed on Thursday. The world's appetite for the red metal will reach 53 million tons annually by mid-century, more than double current levels, but fall short of supply by 2.7 million tons without more recycling and mining, the report forecasts. People who say that there's enough copper supply out there are not taking into account the scale of the energy transition, Dan Jurgen, S&P's vice chairman, told Reuters. Without some give, you're not going to be able to achieve those climate goals. We will now look at the top news in the agricultural sector. Major global wheat exporters Ukraine and Russia see positive signs in discussions which could lead to the resumption of Ukrainian Black Sea grain exports after Wednesday's talks in Istanbul, their officials said. Russia, Ukraine, Turkey and the United Nations are due to sign a deal next week aimed at resuming Ukraine's grain exports. Turkish Defense Minister Hulusi Akar said after the talks, although UN Chief Antonio Guterres was a little more cautious. Ukraine is definitely a step closer to a result, the country's infrastructure minister Alexander Kubrakov told Reuters on Thursday.
That is all for today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to TradeFlow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at TradeFlow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.